And I think we're live. So welcome to this amazing live stream that we're going to have with Basel and JS being joined by our amazing developers. And hello to all of you wonderful people of Strapi and everybody who's joining us today. And today we're going to cover the migration process and give you the big overview of what we want to do and what we want to cover. And so if you're in the comments, say hello, let us know where you're from. But we're going to jump and go through this because there's quite a bit to cover, and I want to make sure that we get through all of it. So what's on the agenda? The goal of this, we're going to talk about the goal of the stream. We're going to cover the migration process overview. We're going to do a demo using the Food Advisor to kind of give you the context of how the process works that we outline and where to find the documentation to give you additional help that you're looking for. Then we'll do some Q&A and talk about what's next. And the goal of this, because obviously we cannot cover everything in one stream. And we will be creating additional resources and hosting future streams around migration to make sure that you and everyone here has great support on the topic. And the whole point of today's stream is to give context to the process, demystify it a little bit, and then show you that we do have good documentation which you could start using today to help you in the process. And we're going to talk about the big picture migration overview. Obviously, we're going to point to all the resources that we already have available, but also goal of this stream is, put your questions in the comment, is to get ideas for additional resources or questions that you may have around the migration process. Then we're going to use codemod to show you how you can use that tool to help you start the process. And again, we're going to talk about finding additional help because we have an amazing Discord channel where you can join and ask questions there. So let's talk about the migration process overview. And for this, I'm going to help Basel help me out here, and we're going to talk about this amazing diagram he has created. So Basel, can you walk us through this?
Yep, sure. Hello, everyone. So basically, this diagram is just like an overview of the steps that you want to take since the beginning of the migration until you reach the end. So the moment you decide to migrate to V4, the most important thing for you is to start the migration with the backend part of Strapi and making sure that you basically don't use your old setup and migrate it immediately, but have a new setup, new database that you're using, not the old one. You want to keep those and start from there. So first of all, make sure that you are connecting to a new database. That's one thing. And then after you do that, you could start following the docs and then just migrating the config files, because there are a lot of changes from basically version 3 and before with the configs that you might add or you have added. And we have documentations for both parts, like how to connect to a new database with the V4 way and stuff like that. And after you do those steps, then we could move to the part where codemod is involved, which is basically the script that would allow you to automate a big part of actually migrating. Of course, you could decide not to use codemod. I personally would absolutely advise you to use codemod. I can't see a reason for you not to use it, but I'll explain that direction anyway. So in case you decide not to use codemod, you would basically, everything is documented. So like even if you choose not to use code modes, everything is available in the docs of how the schemas have changed from V3 to V4 and stuff like that. And you would actually need to basically do that yourself manually if you choose to. So you'd have to check the documentation, check what changed, how everything is written now, and also move the folder structure yourself. Of course, anything that you have customized, controllers, services, whatever you have added, you would be doing it in this part. But I would, as I said, I would suggest you to use codemod because it will automatically save you a lot of time. It would migrate for you the folder structure from the V3 folder structure to the P4 folder structures. It will update your dependencies in the package to JSON to the new ones of Strapi V4. And also it will update your schemas, so you don't have to actually do that yourself, and that's a lot of time saving. Of course, it will not do like your customized stuff for you, so it will not migrate the controllers or services or stuff like that. You would actually have to do this part yourselves. But I would say, like, if you have not a lot of customizations, it will not take a lot of time. If there are, then basically you just have to take that step and try to migrate from what you have written in V3 to V4. And it's also as well important to note here that you actually have the resources in the documentation of how to basically customize the controls or services in V4. So that's also available. And Paul, if you want to slide as well to the next step.
Yes.
Yep. And at this stage, basically at this stage, the application itself should be running. And once you run it, it will automatically update the database with the tables and stuff that you need. And then you will finally be able to go to the basically data migration step. And in the data migration step, we have the docs as well. We have very specific docs about how the tables change from V3 to V4. But we also have provided a migration script that, of course, I would advise you to use. Because there's like that's basically the easiest way to do that, and it's available on GitHub. And yeah, so check that out and basically try it out, and hopefully it will migrate your data for you, and that should be basically the end step, and you would have successfully migrated from V3 to V4 application.
Yeah.
And
no. Thank you very much for that outline. And I feel like this is the goal of this video, is to do a demo where you can see how we're using this exact chart and this process, and to see how each different step and where you could find the documentation that allows you to have the answers. So one of the challenges I had before seeing this and just going straight to the docs, I felt like I was missing the context around what was the overall process and what to do. And once I understood it, believe it or not, outside of, obviously the truth is, if you have a lot of custom code, that's going to add additional time to your, migration. But if you took a plain V3 project, believe it or not, this is actually a very simple steps to follow. And we're going to demonstrate that today. And so Basel already mentioned, but what does codemod do? It literally makes your job and life way easier, because it does change the folder structure of from V3 to V4. It updates models to content types, setting JSON to schemas. And for me, the biggest time saver is that it updates all of your schema JSON files. Like if you had to do that manually and you have a lot of different content types, it would literally take a long time. So like Basel said, there's no reason why you shouldn't start with codemod. And if there is a use case, it's probably for like 0.1% of most of us, because we have highly specialized Strapi application. And so, my wrong slide here. So we're going to actually jump into the demo. This is going to be the bulk of the experience. And because we're doing this live, we're probably going to run into snags, which is perfectly fine. And that's expected, because when you're live coding or when you're working on your migration yourself, you are also going to run into problems. And so we are here to kind of, go through that process with you together. And so what I've done for this application, I literally just downloaded whatever the latest food advisor we had in the repo for V3. And I'll share that link with you, just so if somebody would like to check it out here as well at the later time and run through the process using this video, you can do so. So I'm going to put it in the link here. But basically, I have that project running, and here's basically what we have. We have all the data already present. So in another tutorial, we're going to cover how to go and migrate the database. But right now, this is full. So when starting out, and let me kind of bring our super dandy flow diagram here. So we're going to start together right from the beginning, which is starting with the code migration, connecting to a new database. And we do have the guide that will allow you to follow. So we're literally first starting in the very first step, which is here. And the most important part, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and stop the server from running. And I'm going to go into, because we're running SQLite database, the process will be a little bit different for you if you're running Postgres or whatever database you're using. I'm going to just rename this to be old data, just to make sure that we don't mess it up. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to run yarn, 1 second here, too many screens open, yarn develop. And what that's going to do is going to recreate a new database that you hear. So this is brand new, all the data is missing, nothing's there. So Norrishouse sends me to the screen again to add all my information, which we're going to skip this for now. We just want to make sure that we point to a new database so we don't have to worry about breaking anything. So once that's done, once we renamed it, let's see what our documentation says for us to do. I have too many tabs open. It's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close this tab for now and go to our folder here. Let me move it closer to where we're working so we have it for reference. So next is we changed the database. So we're going to start find the docs, and we're going to talk about manually migrating our configurations. And we could go to the docs and check it out. And here it'll show you all the different examples. And as you could see here, and I'll show you this in the project, there are certain things that no longer exist in Strapi version 3 and certain things that do change. And the easiest way for me to show you this is to go in my code here. And if you go into our configuration, you could see that here we only have our database.js file, our middlewares, and server.js file. And I have a reference project for before, and I suggest if you're doing your first migration, keep one handy to help you kind of see the differences. So if we take a look at our reference project, you could see that we have a couple of additional things and changes. And in particular, if you look at the middlewares folder, it is structured slightly different than it is structured in our V3 project. And so for the brevity of this, what I'm literally going to do, I'm going to delete this folder because we don't need it. And I'm going to leave policies for now. And I'm going to delete all of these because we're going to have them match the V4 version. And what I'm going to do off screen literally is I'm going to take the configuration file just because it's easier, but you could look at the documentation that we have and you could read more about it that will explain to you what we're doing. But basically, we are migrating our configuration files to make sure that we have our database.js, server.js, admin.js, middlewares, contasks if you're using it, API.js, and plugins.js if you're using them in V4. So I am basically going to copy and paste that into my project. So just give me one moment here. And so now I just basically moved all those required folders. So now we have our admin, API.js, slightly different. We have our API.js, database.js, our middleware.js. So now it all reflects the changes that we need to make in our configuration file. So the next step that we want to do is also, and you will find this in documentation, is that inside our source file, okay, 1 second here, source API. Nope, we are already in source, I think. Oh.
Yeah, you are in the V3 already.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So what we need to do is create, in 1 second here, I'm kind of, okay, this is just make sure I'm in the right screen. So this is all set. So now what we're going to do, we're migrated our configuration. So now what we're going to do, we're going to save the changes and we're going to run our codemod command. So let me just do git add, git commit, and I'm going to say message before codemod. And then that's all set. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new branch before running the migration process. So I'm going to do get branch. Let's call it migration. So get checkout, migration. And so now we are in our brand new branch. We updated our config folder. So let's take a look what our chart says. So now we are ready to go, and we're ready to use code mods. So I sent the link in the chat for those of you who are interested, but I'll quickly share it on screen as well, just so you could see that all the resources that I'm using are the resources that are available for all of us. So here's the code mods page. It will show you how it works and what it does. And the best command to use is going to be this one, npx strapi at strapi code mods migrate. So I'm going to copy and paste this, go back to my terminal, and paste that command. So while this loads, it's going to ask me what we want to migrate, which is going to be our application. And by the way, if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat and we'll get to them once we cover the majority of the topics that we want to cover, because we want to make sure that we give everyone an overview of what the process is. Once this happens, we're going to go ahead and select the application here and enter our root folder for our project. So now what that did is went ahead and it's going to do all the changes. And if you want to see, I believe what to see the changes that it made, you could run this command here, and I'll quickly just do it so we could take a look that it actually did stuff for us. So notice what it did. It removed a lot of the dependencies, added newer dependencies for us here, and shows all the things that were renamed, all the schemas that were changed, and everything. So all of this like hard work for us. It's a lot of stuff that CodeMods does for you. So all of this is done for you automatically, which is amazing. So let me just exit here for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add these new files created, and I'm going to save them. I'm going to say after codemod, just in case. And once that's done, our codemod basically converted all the files to match our V4 project. This V3 folder is basically what was left of our projects. We technically don't need it unless you want to use it for reference. But all of our folder structure, schemas, everything was updated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on changing and double checking dependencies. But before I do that, I want to show you that it's also in the documentation. So if you go to our migration guide and take a look, it'll show you the server configuration, all the different configurations that we have. And I think I have a link for changing dependencies. I'll show you that in just a second. So that's the configuration, dependencies. So here we are. So this is for updating your dependencies, and it will show you the difference between the V3 package JSON file and examples of V4 here and what you need. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and update that in my code first. So go to my package JSON file. Let me close this down a little bit here. So instead of me typing everything out, I will just update it here because there are certain things we're using and certain things we're not. And again, in your particular project, you will have to refer to what you've done and make sure that you cover all the appropriate things here. Copy from another screen, the magic of copy and paste. And so if we take a look, these are the dependencies that we are going to be using. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch, because V3, my last project was using Node 12. So we're going to actually switch to use Node 16. I'm going to remove Node modules, and I'm going to restart the application here, rebuild, and then run develop. So now it's going to be pulling all the required packages after we changed our dependencies. And it's going to be a minute. But basically, at this point, we migrated majority of the code base outside of our controllers, services, and routes. But all the file structure was moved, all the schemas was updated. We are updating our dependencies. And then this is going to bring us to the next step of the process here, which is going to go and update the customization of routes, controllers, and services. By the way, if you have plugins installed, if they don't support V3 or you have to update them, that process would be manual. There's some plugins that you could update with codemods too, but that's going to be a separate topic of another video. So let's see how we're doing. Still waiting. All right. So when everything is set and done, we're going to try to see what happens. Hopefully we don't get any errors. So it's going to run yarn develop, and sure enough, we have an error which says can't find Strapi utils. And so that is coming from, I'll show you where it's coming from. Here is, we go here. Let's see. We are in our source API. We go to our universal, and we have a custom GraphQL schema here. Let me close this down a bit. And here it's using Strapi utils, but we're now using, I believe, Strapi @Strapi-utils. So this should fix our issue. Let's check it out. Develop. And so now we have another issue here. And this is an issue with our database. And because we just rebuilt everything, I believe what we can do now, and because we hopefully did not point to your production database, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this database that was previously in V3. And I'm going to run, I believe I could just run yarn develop without building. Yep, and I can't spell, which everybody should know who's been attending our streams. And so now we have a different complaint here. So our database is good, and the complaint is we're missing certain keys. And basically the issue is because we just updated our project, our .env file now needs to reflect all the additional variables that we need. For instance, when we added inside our config, we had our admin.js, so we're expecting admin.js secret, API token salt, and certain other variables that I'm going to add here, I believe in server. Yep, this is what we're complaining about, the API keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all the required information to our env file. And let's see here. And we're going to rerun the process again. Let me close this. And okay, run yarn develop. So now we have a completely different error. So our error here says server wasn't able to start properly because we had a hard time creating get categories endpoint, and it's just not working. So this is actually a good sign, because what this means is that we now just have to update our controllers, routes, and resolvers to match what v4 should look like. And I'll show you the documentation where you could find more help about it. 1 second here. The pressure of live coding. Try to keep all your links organized and where to find them. But this is the process. And the truth is, like, you know, we made a lot of changes in v3 to v4, and this process of migration is not going to be this difficult, even though once you know how to do this, it's not that difficult. But you know, going from v4 to v5 is going to be a lot easier. And the reason why is because we made a lot of big changes to our backend. Literally almost rewrote majority of the application. And so this is something that we have to do only this time. And so we're going to start replacing our routes. And I'm going to just show you the reference here in the doc. So when you use in our documentation, it will talk about how to update your routes. And our core routes have a certain structure. So now we're using the Strapi factories. And this is basically going to be the signature of your route. And you copy and paste this literally from the documentation, just to show you there's no magic. I'm using documentation. And there's also documentation on how to write custom routes, which once you build your project, the like customizing stuff, basically, if you're familiar with writing custom controllers in v4, that process is literally the same. So let's go ahead now to our code base. I'm gonna close the screen. And so codemod in the future will probably do this automatically. At the time of this recording, this is not the case for us. So for each content type, I will have to do this a little bit manually. So if we go to routes, it's still, and if you have custom routes, it's going to be slightly different, but this is all the generic routes that Strapi v3 had. So we're going to literally copy and paste. Let me go back again. My copy and paste doesn't like me. It must be like my Apple computer. Blame it on Apple. Perfect. Come on, paste. It's funny, like copy and paste should work, no problem, but it's giving issues. So let me do it again. The excitement is real. I'm going to manually copy and not. I have this problem on Mac all the time. I don't know why. It's maybe I don't sweet talk it enough. And so now what I'm going to do is basically just make sure that here I rename it to point to what I'm actually doing. So this is going to be category. And what we need to do, we actually need to update this in all the routes. And so now I'm going to go into footer. And this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but we are going to update code mods at some future to hopefully do this a little bit easier. But for now, this is the process, and this is why we're showing it to you. So you guys and everybody and girls see the process. And so this is going to be footer, update, and let's go next to history, routes, history. Again, no custom routes here, perfectly fine. And this is going to be history, update, and then we're going to go to likes, routes, and we're going to update. And the biggest thing that I would say here, make sure you type stuff correctly, because if you misspell something, it's not going to work. I'm not going to say that it happens to me all the time. I'm just saying, the struggle is real. But basically, you need to update your route structure to match what we're doing in v4. So that's looking good. Let's go to what else? Reviews, routes, reviews. And by the way, we're going to make additional content around the migration topics. I know some people really enjoy reading that documentation. Some people like to have complementary videos. such as this one, and we'll make designated videos to help us cover each portion of this in a little bit more detail, and something that you'll be able to watch on your own pace. But you can also refer to this live stream. So again, I believe this is our last route that we have to change, and this is going to be universal and update. So once that's done, let's see, would it work? I'm just going to say no, it's not going to work because we didn't update everything. But let's run yarn develop and see if at least we get a different error this time. So when we run yarn develop, and now it says I can't find the handle for the category.find, and that basically says it cannot find the controller that it's looking for. So same process as we did with routes. If we take a look at our controller documentation here, and I'm opening bajillion tabs, which is fine. And this is literally the same example because now we're using factories, and this is something that we expect. So I'm literally going to copy and paste this again and go through the same process as well. And the reason this is kind of taking a little bit of time because we wanted to make sure to get some guides for you as soon as possible. codemod at this moment in time does not do this automatically, but it's something that we will do when we get a chance. So in the future, you might not have to do these steps that I'm doing now. But for the time being, if you're running into issues, it's probably because you didn't update your routes and probably you didn't update your controllers. So I'm going to do same process here. So this is category. And again, spelling is of the essence. Very important to make sure that we spell things correctly. That's been our announcement for today. It's funny, when coding, how much headaches simple spelling can cause. So I'm always weary. And the fact that I'm on stream, that makes it even worse because I'm nervous as heck. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot English. I don't know how English works anymore. But I think we're doing so far so good. So the idea is we want to make sure we place all the controllers to match what the structure and the use case is in V4. And like in this example, like we have custom controller logic. So this is something you would have to do manually, but we want to build our application first. So I'm just going to comment it out for the moment because we want to build our application and then go through the process of customizing our controllers. So I'm going to say, come back later, come back to this. Thank you. Amazing VS Code suggestions. And we're just going to put just our standard controller here. And we're going to rename it to like. And then let's see, we have restaurants, which is going to make an assumption that this already has a lot of custom logic as well. So we're going to do that as well. And I'll come back to everybody's questions in a bit. But for now, we just because we want to make sure we cover all the topics that we started with to give everybody kind of at least a starting jumping point of where and how you can make big progress in updating your application. Restaurant, spell that right, hopefully. And then what we're going to do is go back to reviews, routes we did, controllers. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to kind of, for now, comment out our custom logic, which we're going to have to update anyway. But for now, the main goal is to make sure our application builds, so at least we're not getting errors. And finally, using controller here. And again, the reason why it's nice that codemod would eventually do this for us, but I like the fact that today I'm doing it manually because you could see kind of what are the changes, what are the updates, and also you could see that if you have customize logic, that's something that you have to manually do. There is no magic pill because people could implement their custom controllers in many different ways. You might have very specific logic. There's no mind reading algorithm that could change that for us. So that is still something that you have to do yourself. But now we're upgraded our controllers. And so what we're going to do, the last final step, we're going to do the same thing for our services. And I'll show you our documentation. And again, I'm constantly referencing this amazing chart that we have where we started, here and we worked through it. Now we're in this process, making sure that we are updating our routes and services. And we are going to do some custom controllers for you today, just to give you an example. But it's literally the same process as it is in V4 documentation. So let's go to categories again and update services. And let me make sure where we were here. Migration services. And notice how I'm not doing anything magical except going to the documentation and copying and pasting. But I'm also going to not lie to you and say, if you haven't seen the general overview of the process, documentation might be a little bit intimidating at first. But after this video, I believe things are going to make sense for you. And by the way, when you're looking to migrate your project, don't just start by migrating your project. Find like a simpler V3 project that has no customizations and run through this process just to get familiarized with what you're doing. So again, we're using our factories for create core services, and we're going to rename it. And I believe this is going to be the last monotonous thing we're going to do. And in the future, this will be done by codemods automatically. But for the time being, we just have to do this. So if you're running into issues and you're trying to figure out why, like something is not working, this might be the reason, is because you haven't updated the V3 routes, controllers, and services structure to match what V4 expects. So let's do that. Then we go to history, services, and boom, here. This is history. And likes. And then we have services, likes. Like. Nice. Then we have restaurants, services. Okay, let's replace that. And again, we will look through the questions after we finish this demo because I want to make sure that, I'm very thankful that we have Basel and JS here. So I want to make sure that we cover what we planned to make sure that you get all the material that you need to at least be able to jumpstart this process and get 80% or 70% into it. So here we have a custom service. And by the way, if you're customizing services, it will be literally the same way you would customize services in V4. And we're going to blah, blah, blah here. For now, we're going to make a standard service, which we will have to the manual code modify ourselves when the time comes. And let's see here. And finally, going to last service here, universal, and add it here. And a lot of people like, Paul, why don't you choose like a simple V4 project to demonstrate? Well, I chose this one because we have, Food Advisor demo as demo, and I know a lot of you played with it V3, so, and everybody could find it on GitHub, so it'll be a great tool to use to kind of talk about the process. So let's do yarn develop and see what errors we get this time. And hopefully there's no errors, hopefully. And of course, there is an error, and let's see what it is. So categories, endpoint, categories. I wonder if category, was it in the routes? That's correct, I believe. controllers. That looks good. Did I misspell anything?
You are omitting the API colon on the UID of your category on line 3. In your file on the left in your editor.
Yep.
The one that is open on the right of the line here, it should be API.
Oh yes, thank you. Man, the pressure of live coding is real. Like I'm like hallucinating it that it was there. Yeah, that's a good point. So again, remember that comment I said about spelling and making sure. So here's another example. I definitely messed up here really bad. So thank you, JS, for good eye. But this is why we do it live, to be like, hey, this is it. And I'm sure somebody in the comments spotted me doing that. And I was like, I'll look at the comments later, And then here we go. Here's later. I'm looking at it right now. So the magic of they'll be terrible if I did the same thing with services and what have you. But they'll be embarrassing. But it's okay.
It happens. It happens to everyone.
Yeah, no, but this is what I'm saying. I don't care about being embarrassed because here's the truth. Like whenever we code, there's always stuff comes up. Like there's it's never a time where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so amazing. I made no mistakes. That almost like never happens. And this is like the beauty of live coding. So I'm just gonna oh my God, like.
And I mean, debugging is part of the job. So
yeah, I didn't make that mistake in services, thank God, because that would have been a lot of typing. But anyway, look, we could all laugh together. So run. But this is good because that, believe it or not, forgetting the API is fairly common there when people starting out. So let's see here. Oh no, another error. But the good news, it's a whole new error. It's a totally new error. And the error we could talk about later, but we are going to briefly talk about it now. And I'll tell you my fix for today. And again, this is the beauty of live coding because sometimes you might have these unexpected things. So if you look at, wrong place. We go to content types, I believe schema.js. And if you take a look here, our enum types have this dash and a number. Here's the issue at the moment, is that we can't have a dash or a number at the moment. And so I am going to replace this structure. And I'll show you what I did. Again, this is just because V4 and I believe GraphQL doesn't like enum starting with the dash.
Numbers. It's with numbers, actually.
And numbers, yes, thank you. Yeah. So this is my workaround. This is just something we will do for today, but I just want to show you sometimes when you run into issues, so we're not starting with numbers, this is beautiful. And so now when I run yarn develop, hopefully we'll have a whole other issue like we're doing. And so the thing that I want to stress here, when you're doing the migration, you will have errors, and this is a part of the process. There's no one-click migrate, especially when you have custom code like this project has. And so I just want to make sure that we have a realistic expectation when you go into the process. And migration from V4 to V5 is going to be much simpler. And oh my gosh, I can't believe it that the app actually built. And like it is 70% there. Okay, whatever you say. No, I don't want to. Oh my God, my password is monkey 19 something at lot
for everything, right?
For everything, monkey.
Yeah.
Actually,
no, we just told everyone.
Yeah, I told everybody monkey 1980. Just go everywhere, try it out. Actually, don't try it out. Listen, if your password is monkey something, I don't want to say anything. So our application built. So this is the crazy part. We just, minus my slow typing and mistyping, we just went from V3. We started here. We point to a different database so we don't break anything. We changed our configs. We did a bunch of stuff. We used code mods. We changed the dependencies, folder structure, and all that nice stuff. And now we are here where we have, if you have custom routes, custom controllers, or custom services, you would have to do that yourself. Here's the good news. If you've done it in V4, it's exactly the same thing and the process you would follow. For instance, if we want to customize something, I'll come back to that in a second. But at this stage, we literally, once we do all our custom logic, we could move on to data migration, which is something we're not going to do today. We will have a separate stream for this. But this is, the fact that our application build is amazing. Like, you know, we should like high fives all around everybody. So now let's close this. I'm kind of excited. Like, I'm secretly shaking under my desk from excitement because I didn't think the app was going to build it. Like, you know, knowing like everything I know. Let me just like clear up the screen here. And so I'm going to keep the restaurants open for now. Actually, we'll come back to it in a second. So I just want to create some real estate here. Oh, man, too many folders, too many things open. Anyway, so what are we going to do now? So now we're saw the process. Our application builds. Let me just save this for the moment. Message, and then you say after controllers update. This message could be more detailed, but for now, for logistics of it, we're going to kind of not worry about. So now we're going to talk about how to customize or create a custom controller. So the good news is that it's the same way you would create a custom controller following our documentation. So notice I'm not in migration guide anymore. Like, you could literally search backend customization, and however you spell it, and it will take you to this beautiful screen where it shows you how to do custom routes, custom policies, custom middleware, like controllers. It'll explain everything to you. So now we're no longer in V3, we're now in V4. And so the same customization that everyone is used to making in V4 is the same things we will do now. So if I go to controllers, it will show you how you could create an entirely custom controller. You could, wrap a core controller and use super.find, or you could replace core action. And this is something that we're going to work on doing here. And just to save time, because this is the process is the same, I literally copy and paste the code from based on this documentation, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of show to you here. 1 second. Not code. So what I would do here, let me close this down a little bit here. I'm going to copy and paste. Oh, wrong one. Let me do it again, and I'll walk through the code just so everybody could see. There's no magic, but I do know that we're kind of really pressed on time, so I want to make sure that we do get to the last piece here. So here's our custom controller, and so we're basically passing a function, and this is all literally from our documentation, and we're getting our we're calling our service, and we're getting using find method to get all of our entities, and then we're sanitizing that output, we're transforming that response, and now this is going to be the custom controller that is going to be called, and it's going to override the previous controller that we had. So this all is going to work for us. So I just wanted to kind of show you, like, if you have custom logic, there is no magic. Like, for instance, like, this is not going to be changed by codemod because your implementation of it could be different. But the good news is the same way you write your controllers using, this is already V4 documentation. We're no longer in V3. We pretty much migrated minus the database to V4. And so the way you would customize your controllers, services, routes, middleware, you would literally use this section in the documentation, something that everybody in V4 is already familiar with. So I'm going to copy and paste that there for reference. The biggest contention and questions that people have, I don't know if it's a contention, to be honest. I just wanted to use that word and say contentious. I don't even know what it means. But the one question that a lot of people have is, how do you customize GraphQL? How do you do that? And for instance, we look here, and for now, we almost migrate to before. There's a lot of custom GraphQL here, but if you take a look at restaurants, and eventually we could delete this, but for now we don't, because it has some GraphQL definitions, and so this just adds some additional types. But if I wanted to override this restaurant's find resolver, I would not do it here. There's a whole new process of doing that. So this is not where you would make the changes. And believe it or not, like we have documentation for it. So let me go migration. Let's see what comes up. Update Strapi versions, migrations. Oops, that's not the right one. Migration 3.3. Oh, come on. Search. I'm not typing something right. So I will just Google Strapi migration doc. So whenever it fails, just go to Google. And so this is and I'll put this link for reference as well. And so again, if you could see that this whole process that I'm doing here, I'm literally following the outline, and that we'll share this. I'll make sure that we have this. I'll get in touch with the documentation team to make sure that we add this to the site. I think this is super helpful because, as you saw by example, it's been helping us a lot. But if you look at the migration guide, we go to our code migrations, like we said, and here we are. We have GraphQL resolvers, and it's going to explain to you, how it was done in v3, and now how it works in v4. And in v4, we're going to be using the extension service to use the GraphQL extension to allow us to write custom code. Now, here they use Nexus, but we also support SDL. That's what I'm going to do in this case. And again, I know we're kind of a little bit short on time, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker here, just because I want to make sure that we have all that information, and then we'll do quick Q&A and end with what's next. But don't worry if we didn't cover everything in the stream, because the good news is that we are going to have additional resources. And join us on Discord. We have the migration channel there, and ask questions or give your suggestions of what you want to see. But let's go back to the code here. So one thing that we did not move from v3 to v4 is that notice this folder, it doesn't have an index.js file. And if you go to our reference project and we take a look in our source, we have our index.js file. We need this file because we have a couple of hooks that we can call, and this is where we are going to we'll add our custom GraphQL logic. And for today, I'm going to do all the code here instead of breaking out into separate folders. But this is what we do. So we do new file index.js, and then I'm just going to copy and paste here. And based on the documentation, we are going to work in this file in terms of adding additional, or creating or overriding custom GraphQL resolvers. So I'm going to, and man, we're really short on time, so we're going to fly through this fast. So bear with me, but we are going to I'll explain everything, and we will do more streams or more details here. So I'm going to change inside this register file, right? I'm going to use the extension service that's going to allow us to extend our GraphQL and create a custom resolver. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste my custom resolver here. And let me zoom out a bit. And so you could look at the documentation, and the truth is we still need to work on a few things on our GraphQL documentation. That's something that we are going to focus on, specifically because I also love GraphQL, so I want to make sure that we have all the resources. But what we're doing here, and this could be, by the way, in a different folder, you could structure. I just put it in here for us to kind of be able to use it for this particular case. And I think I'm here missing a little doohickey here. And so what we're doing is, let me just start the server here for a second. I'll show you. It's great. It's still building. So if we go here and we type GraphQL. So if you look at the docs, we have our restaurants, and it basically shows the structure, the query, all the data. So what we're doing, we're basically overriding this with our custom resolver to be able to add additional functionality if we have to. So what I'm doing here is I'm defining this query here. This is going to override the generic controller, as you will. And we're not adding any custom code, just for the brevity of this tutorial. But if you were to do custom logic, you would do it inside your resolver. And what we're doing here, and actually, I think, Jess, you'll be better at speaking to this. Can you walk us through this example?
Yep, I just think you took the
wrong one.
Yeah, the wrong one.
And let's see here. Yes, I did.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
So you can use services, right? You could point to services, but can you just tell us first the difference between GraphQL in V3 and GraphQL in V4, and why?
Yeah.
How does it work now?
Yeah, so the main difference between V3 and V4 is that we switch from a declarative API to a programmatic API. A programmatic API, which is the extension service in V4, we wanted to offer more granularity in the way we can customize every aspect of the GraphQL queries, mutation, types, everything. And also offer more tools. And mainly, like the main point was also to decouple the REST API from the GraphQL API, because up until now, we were like, you could bind your controllers from REST, from the REST API to your GraphQL resolvers. And it was creating a lot of situations where you had performance issues due to a relation being populated when you didn't want to. You also had like a lot of the different convention that respected, because we are basically transforming the GraphQL context into a REST query. So we are transforming everything, and we were not getting the benefits from basically GraphQL. And so we switched to this API. And so now what's happening here is that, so we're using the SDL, and so the type definition and the resolvers that we write by hand. As mentioned in the documentation, you can also use Nexus.js, which is a GraphQL JavaScript library. And so here, in the example that we are doing, we are defining the type of the query, so the restaurants, the argument of the query, everything. And in the resolve function, what we are doing is that we are first getting some utils that will allow us to transform, for instance, our data to the expected data output of the restaurant entity response collection. So this is the infamous format with data and attributes. We also have the transform args, which will allow you to transform all your GraphQL arguments into a Strapi query that you can use in the entity service. And finally, we're just getting our content type for this query. Next, what we are doing on line 32 is that we are actually transforming our GraphQL arguments. So the filters, the pagination, the publication state, everything. We are converting that into Strapi arguments. So Strapi filters, Strapi pagination argument and stuff like that. And it's a big difference because, for instance, in the filters in GraphQl, you cannot start your attributes with symbol, whereas in Strapi, you only have that. So it was one of the main reason why. So you have all those transformation. And then we are using the entity service. And this is one of the points you had question about. We are actually using the entity service, which is the service offering the Strapi domain abstraction. So the Strapi business logic abstraction that can be used anywhere in the application. This is the way to go for almost everything. And here we are not using the generated core service for the entity. So basically you could do strapi.service and then type API restaurant, and you have access to some methods. And so here we're using the entity service because in the regular core API service, it's also doing the calculation for the pagination, which is for GraphQl handled in the subqueries and in the child resolvers. So we don't want to compute the pagination. So we are directly using the entity service instead. And finally, once we have the data, we are just transforming the data to the new response structure and displaying it. I try to be as fast as possible. There might be some things that are not that clear.
Yeah, and thank you, Jess. And so we are going to make additional resources specifically for GraphQL once we get all the migration stuff out of the way. But so now we saw how to create a custom controller, how to create a custom resolver. And I know we pressed for time, so I'll just do a quick review of what we covered. And so we started with a V3 project, and we followed these steps. And we'll add these to the documentation. I'll make a note today to reach out because this is a great overview. Now you have this video where we followed the process from the beginning using code mods in 99.9 cases. That's what you should do. And we couldn't go to the brevity of the time. We couldn't customize every controller, resolver, service that we might have used in our application. But we pretty much, if we did that step, we would be here. And the last step we would have left is using data migration. I know there was a question about migration scripts. You could find them here. To be honest, I haven't done the data migration yet, but I am working on researching this, testing the scripts. I know a lot of people used the scripts before, so it worked. I just personally haven't done it. I'll put it in the link for you, but that stream will be coming. We'll talk more detail about, going from MongoDB to SQLDB, and then going from SQL v3 to SQL v4. So that's coming. But we basically, using today's video, using this graph, you're now able to go from v3 to v4. And once we did it, I hope you noticed that all the documentation that we were looking for was literally in v4. So after we got to this spot here, we no longer needed the migration guide. That part was done. All we needed to do is literally look at the v4 documentation the same way you are and everybody's used to using in v4. And so let me quickly, and I just answered, yes, they do have a script. I just, let me share that link here for the migration stuff. You could check it out. In the documentation, we also have how to migrate from Mongo to SQL, but you would have to go Mongo v3 to SQL, Strapi v3, and then SQL, Strapi v3 to SQL4 migration. So there's a couple of steps here. So let me see other questions here because I know JS and Basel are pressed for time. By the way, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you both on a different time zone have a long day, and this is like the tail end of your day. So I really appreciate both of you giving us the time. And so I hope that you were able to kind of see the context of the migration and see the process. It's not as scary when you understand the outline, and I hope we did a great job in this video to do that. And so I know we're going to do Q&A, but we have the migration chat in Discord. If you haven't joined Discord, go ahead and join Strapi Discord and ask our questions there. And I'll send you the link here. It'll be a great place for us to communicate with each other. And yes, someone commented JS and Basel rock. And to be honest, yes, they do. Without them, this presentation would be exercise in like failure. So thank you so much for coming today and helping.
You're too modest.
And coming on. No, listen, it's the team effort, because what people don't understand, it's not that like I knew this stuff before. I bugged Basel, I bugged JS so many times to learn these things, to help everybody, help each other. And so finally, the last screen, I want to show you what's next, what's coming up next. And I kind of want to put this out there to commit myself that this is what we're definitely going to do. So we are going to have a stream on the differences between V3 and V4. I'm going to invite Arlene. I still have to plan it. But we're going to chat about the changes we made in Strapi 4 and why, because that's a very important thing that we have to understand. Then it's going to take some time, because to produce 8 videos will take time, but we're going to make a video kind of taking what we did here and then adding more detail. It's going to be 8-part migration series that we're going to do. Then we are going to have a stream that I'm still yet to plan. That's going to be database migration. So any questions, going from MongoDB to SQL, or from SQL to V4, we are going to talk about those things. And finally, because Bolt and JS agree that we need to talk about GraphQL more and add more resources, around GraphQL, we are going to cover best practices with creating send resolvers, working with GraphQL, and JS is going to join us for that. But with that being said, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody, Basel, JS. Like I said, this stream would not be possible without you, so thank you. And we're going to see everyone later. So everybody have a good day, good night, good morning, wherever you are, and take care.